Data analytics and AI are transforming how buildings operate, how decisions are made, and ultimately how value is created. These technologies are no longer futuristic. They're here and they're reshaping the way we manage properties every single day. That's why we're thrilled to have Jeff Thompson, Vice President of Global Tech Enablement at Building Engines, a JLL company, with us today. Jeff is a recognized leader in CRE technology and innovation, and he spent decades helping property teams harness data and emerging tech to improve operations, drive efficiency, increase NOI, and deliver better tenant experiences. So we're going to delve into how data analytics and AI are changing the game and what property professionals need to know to stay competitive. So Jeff, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Let's dive right in and let's start with the big picture. You've been at the forefront of CRE technology for years. From your perspective, why have data analytics and AI become so critical for property owners and managers today?
It's a really interesting time right now because the data has always been there. The industry is awash in data. Almost every system in place in a building now, and almost every activity that tenants engage in generates information that you could use. But there were always barriers to taking it into account when you needed to make a decision. So the data was always there, but it wasn't really being leveraged. The exciting thing about AI is that it allows you to bring much more of that information to bear when you're trying to make a decision. And I think that that's really where competitive advantage can be found in that you have these two sides. You have, on the one side, you have this huge environment of data that's being produced. And on the other side, you have all these different tools that are now readily available to the business. And that's the challenge right now is sort of which tools do you pick? How do you apply it to the data you have? How do you structure the data you have to match the decisions you need to make? It's a really exciting space. And, you could say exciting, but you could also say really challenging depending on, where you are in the process.
That's really interesting. You're right. We have all of this data. How do you decide what to use, how to use? So you've witnessed the evolution of data's role in property management firsthand. How have you seen that role change over the years?
So it's interesting. It's like a hockey stick graph where I think that there was increasing usage and increasing sophistication of tools. And then more recently, there have been game-changing tools that have been brought into the industry. And I think the biggest change has been the fact that you can take all of this data and apply a tool to it to surface insight, even when you haven't preset what your decisions are going to be. I think that's the most exciting part of this because it used to be that you would sort of dive into this data environment and gather information and structure it in support of a process or in support of a decision you needed to make. Buying an asset, replacing a piece of equipment, leasing to a tenant, all those sorts of things. And they were sort of very purpose-built workflows, and you knew the information that you wanted. And it was, somewhat limited. What's exciting now is if you structure the data in the right way and you interconnect it in the right way, there are tools that you can put over the top of it that surface insights for you. And that could include things like opportunities for revenue that you didn't see, or opportunities for efficiency that you didn't see. And it's not making the decision for you, but it's presenting you with lots of options in terms of things that you could do and levers that you could pull that you might just not have seen before. I think that's the biggest change is it's flipped from needing to know exactly what you were trying to get out of the information
Mhm.
to now you have tools that can actually help you surface insights and opportunities. So the goal is more about connecting the information properly and representing the portfolio and its behavior and the assets in it. So if you take care of that, if you get your data house in order, there are lots of tools that can help you derive value from it.
Fascinating. So I'm going to switch topics a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Operational challenges, they're top of mind for every CRE team, especially right now in this environment. What do you see as the biggest hurdles today? And how could data analytics help address those hurdles?
Sure. So I think there's a couple. I think that margin is a huge challenge across the board. Every owner, every tenant company is trying to save. Every owner's trying to save. Every management firm's trying to save. So I think that the biggest challenge is finding efficiencies while delivering service. So you want to
Mhm.
make sure your service stays where it is and your relationships stay where they are. But on the other hand, what you're trying to do is minimize your expense and maximize your margin. That's a huge challenge. You're being told to do contradictory things all the time. Everyone is. It's just the environment, we live in. And I think that's where AI can really help is that if you're trying to make a process more efficient, it's not a case of cutting teams and doing lots of other, things like that, because people are already stretched. They're trying to do more with existing teams. You're trying to do more with fewer resources. And I think AI-based tools and agentic tools allow you to automate some of the tasks that you have to deal with, which makes it easier to do more with the team you have and to expand your reach. And that can make things more efficient and improve margin. I think that's what I've seen as the biggest challenge with the teams that we talk to. They're trying to deliver really high quality service and they're trying to do it in the most cost effective way possible. It's that trade-off, trying to find ways to make that work.
Yeah, and there's all these articles and news stories about AI is going to replace workers, but it feels like AI actually can supplement and help those of us trying to do more with less,
Yeah.
even better, more efficiently, versus replacing people. What are your thoughts on that?
So what I've seen a lot of, particularly recently, is the sort of two big swim lanes.
Mhm.
There's one swim lane around AI and analytics, which looks from the top down, looking at an entire portfolio, the entire data environment, and trying to derive insight from it. And that really isn't doing anybody any harm from a team staffing standpoint, because all it's really doing is it's widening the pool of information that you can use when you're making a decision. And that's a really good way to think about AI. You're limited in how much information you can take in when you're trying to prepare for a meeting or a discussion or if you're putting a report together. AI can really broaden that funnel of the types of information that you can take into account when you're trying to figure out what's going on or making a decision. So that's one swim lane. Then there's another one, which is about empowering property teams to make them more efficient. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity in that it's not replacing people, but what it's doing is it's taking some of the automated tasks out, allowing them to be more efficient. So if you had to write an outbound, communication to 200 people and it needed to be tailored with a certain amount of data to each one, it's
Mm.
great to have a tool that can do that for you instead of, taking the weekend and plowing away and, generating all 200. Or if you're taking on a new building or taking on a new portfolio and you're presented with folder after folder of documents about the building, all your leases, all your
Yeah.
contracts, all your commissioning documents, and everything else, you're going to need that information later. And rather than embarking on an exercise to try to read every single one of them or to have a team do that, you can ingest all that information, put AI over the top of it, and then have access to that going forward. So it's hugely valuable. And I think that's where AI tools can provide that efficiency where you're bringing documents in, breaking them down into the data that's contained in it, making that accessible through the information systems that you use. It makes it easier to prioritize your preventive maintenance. So you could look at out of 100 pieces of equipment, which ones should I maintain now? Which ones should I replace now? And which ones can I, push maintenance off on a little bit as long as I'm doing my testing and manage my budget and everything else more proactively. Those are all empowering technologies for the property teams. They're not reducing them. So it's more about those tactical tools being implemented in the systems that people use already. So there's kind of a phrase that comes up over and over again around AI is it's a feature, not a product. Like AI on its
Right.
own really doesn't really do anything for you unless it's embedded in the systems that you're using to accomplish a task. And I think that's really the way to think of it, is that if you're using a tool to do your preventive maintenance or inspections or work orders or track your contracts, making those tools smarter allows you to do more and work faster in the sense that you're able to deliver services in a more targeted way and you're able to be more efficient. And so that improves your margin. So I really do think it's not anything to be afraid of. Think of it in terms of being an accelerator for the tools that you use, and it's something that enables you to make more informed decisions and to prioritize things better. I think that's really the promise of AI is embedding it in the tools that you use and the services you provide. It's an improvement. It's a benefit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I really appreciate those examples you just went through. Those are really solid examples. Do you have any examples that you could share where data-driven insights have directly improved efficiency or reduced cost for property teams?
Oh, sure. I mean, in terms of reducing cost, being able to identify through analytics pieces of equipment that have bad repair histories or
Mhm.
that are inefficient from an energy standpoint, it can save you money right out of the gate. Identifying where to put your capital budget in terms of replacing or updating equipment, there's huge efficiencies and savings to be gained there. And there's margin improvements to be made with that. And AI can really help you. We're designing and building features into our tools around leveraging AI to update replacement cost and useful life based on the latest information that's out there and bringing it to bear when you're looking at the equipment that you have. And that helps you prioritize and use your dollars most efficiently and effectively. The other thing that saves time and efficiency is that getting your lease documents ingested into the systems so that you have the terms of the lease alongside the services that you're providing. So you don't miss revenue opportunities. So there may be services that you're asked to provide, but the team providing the service doesn't have access to the clause in the lease that tells you that you can charge for it. So those sorts of things can really help. And doing analytics on which buildings are monetizing the amenities in the building really successfully, what works, what doesn't work, what are people finding, and then surfacing those as opportunities for the other buildings in the portfolio. There are lots of examples of that. And I think that's what people are really looking to do. And that's one example of where it's a win on both sides, in that people are competing for tenants. They want to make their buildings as attractive as possible. They want to provide amenities. There is this sort of flight to quality where people are looking for highly amenitized space because they want people to come back into the buildings. And so the fact that you are providing those additional amenities and managing them in a cost-effective way and charging for them benefits the owner, benefits the tenant, benefits the manager. So I think those are cases where you can use these tools and analytics to tune those amenities and monetizing them so that everybody wins.
Those are terrific examples, and they're real world examples. When it comes to evaluating building performance, it can feel overwhelming with the amount of data, like you've talked about, we have stored and we have in our systems. What metrics should owners and operators prioritize?
So that's a really good one. Companies have cultures. So there are different companies that focus on different things, and it varies by asset type and it varies by company culture in terms of what you're trying to deliver. Some portfolios are very amenity driven. They're trying to provide a whole array of different services. And so the number of metrics that they might want to track might be different from another similar building even. So the metrics that seem to be consistent across the board, being able to evaluate your response time and completion time on tenant requests, and not even presupposing what that needs to be in a given building, but setting up SLAs that are sensitive to the building and the asset type, and understanding how long it normally takes you to respond when a tenant has a request, and then how long it takes to deal with that request when someone has responded. It gives you a really solid measure of how responsive your team is. And then it also will let you know, there's kind of the operations measure of when the execution team has heard about it to the time they finish. That gives you one measure. Okay. And then it gives you more of an administrative measure from the time of the request to the time it gets into the execution team's hands. Like those two measures tend to be really good levers that people can work to optimize the performance of the building. The other ones, actually, I have a favorite one in this. On the maintenance side, almost everybody in one way or another looks at preventive maintenance completion, percentage as a metric. They look at how much of the maintenance should you be doing and how much of it got done. What we found in designing our analytics and our metrics is that there were some gaps in that, because you could have two identical buildings. They're both 1 million square feet. In one building, they've done a full, building audit of all the equipment in the building. All of it's gone into the program. All of it has maintenance schedules. And so they're performing tons of maintenance work. And they're executing, let's say, 90% on time completion on their maintenance. You have another building out in the field where you don't have a lot of direct access to. They've only put 10 pieces of equipment in, and they've only put one work order a year in for each piece of equipment, but they've done all 10. And so that building shows up at 100% completion versus the 90% completion in the much higher operational tempo building. So what we did is, when we're doing our metrics, we look at equipment density. So does the number of assets being tracked for the building make sense for the type of building and the market and the use in the building? And so you look at that as a baseline. And then you look at coverage. So you look at how many of the assets in the building are covered by a maintenance schedule and an inspection. And then you look at your completion rate and your on-time completion rate. So you have this metric. It's almost exactly the same on the front end. So you work it down to a completion percentage and an on-time percentage, but you know that you've built it up in an effective way. So if you're looking across a large portfolio, it makes more sense.
It gives you more of a full picture view.
Oh, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really terrific example. You've given us a lot of examples on data analytics and on AI, and AI is such a hot topic right now. But as I'm talking with property managers and even C-suite level, they're still struggling some at times to see the additional applications,
Mhm.
real world applications in CRE operations right now. Are there any other practical use cases that kind of go
Sure.
beyond the hype?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think the one thing that people tend to miss when they're looking at AI tools or utilizing AI in their environment is they overlook the data. The
Hmm.
world is awash in AI tools right now. It's become a buzzword. It's table stakes for talking to companies about solutions and things like that. And it's definitely part of the dialogue and it will continue to be. But one of the things to make sure you maintain focus on is getting your house in order from a data standpoint.
Yeah.
So making sure that you have a really good ecosystem of tracking the assets that are being managed, the equipment in the buildings, all the leases, all the contracts, all the vendors, all the tenants, and then making sure they're connected in a data environment that AI can use. Like one of the terms you'll hear a lot about AI is hallucination. So if you
Hmm.
ask AI a question and it doesn't have good data to work with, it'll come up with something. And that's a problem, in the sense that in order to make AI as effective as possible and as practical as possible, it needs a good environment to work in. I would weight your effort and attention to sort of the data side of the house to make sure the systems are integrated properly and the data is being stored in a consumable way, because it's not easy sometimes to do that. And I think there's planning that goes into creating that data environment so that those AI tools will have a good environment or good data to work from, really. The other thing to watch out for with AI is with some tools, it's not immediately obvious that putting your information into that tool is going to make it public. So I think that
Right.
management firms need to be extremely careful about the tools they use. So they don't take all of their leases and upload them into a public domain tool, and then all of a sudden all their leases are out there for other companies to leverage or other models to
Mhm.
train from. So I think there's that piece of it. So paying attention to the data domain, like that framing problem is a really big one. And I think that if you do that, though, and you have really good interconnected data, you can get so much more value out of it than you would otherwise. So if you think about an asset manager who's trying to value a building,
Hmm.
if one asset manager just has access to the financial system, so all they can do is put AI across their financial application and do a set of metrics on the value of the building, they'll get one value. If you have another asset manager asking exactly the same question of an AI-based tool, but that tool has not only the data in the financial system, but all the operations data to give it context. They
Hmm.
understand the lifespan of the equipment in the building and how much it's going to cost to replace and when it needs to replace. Knowing all the contracts in the building and when they're all going to be up for renegotiation and all the leases and everything else. Having all of that interconnected and cross-referenced in a consumable way makes those AI-based tools much more valuable when you're trying to really assess the value of a building, whether to get into or out of a given sector. Like all those decisions can be supported by AI, but you need to give it good data to work with.
Yeah, so for organizations that maybe are a little bit hesitant or slower to adopt AI or advanced analytics, obviously you want to start with the data like you just
Mhm.
outlined, but what other advice is there for getting started? Let's say you've got your data under control. You know where your data is, you've got it in the one place in the right
Sure.
structure. Now what?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. Again, AI is sort of a feature, not a product. And so in our
Yeah.
tools, for example, we have a document intelligence feature. So you can, if you have all your contracts and all your leases in the system, and you have a question, it really is as simple as rather than trying to find five different PDFs and five different spreadsheets to get the answer that you want, being able to just ask a question. I need to look at these five leases and understand what options clauses are available in each. It
Mhm.
really is that simple. And that's where you start to win people over to using the tools. So I think that that idea of being able to pull information in and then use a really simple AI-based interface to get the information that you want out. Generating a stacking plan, like using AI to just really quickly say, take a look at all my leases and give me a stacking plan, or show me what my exposure is to leases that are expiring or equipment that's going out of service, that sort of thing. Those types of questions that would normally result in a research exercise where people have to go and
Right.
find things it makes a big difference. It's the difference between spending 4 hours in an afternoon to find something or just asking a question. That's where I think people that are hesitant about AI start to get won over to the tools. It's that practical day to day, removing friction from the process. And so it's not taking anything away from them. It's not going to remove their favorite activity, trust me. So it's more about making what they need to do easier and giving them more information to work with. And I think that goes a long way to making people less afraid of what AI is going to do to the organization. I think that's a big deal. The other thing is what I find is that AI is terrific at distilling action items from meeting minutes or from transcripts of meetings or from all the different notes that you get in from different people about what they heard somewhere, after they've met with a whole bunch of different people. That just makes things so much more efficient when you think of bringing all that information together into one place, running an AI tool through it, and it identifies the 10 or 15 different action items that need to be done based on that conversation. It can save you hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those sorts of tactical, simple sort of improvements, it just wins people over to the fact that the tools are a net positive instead of something to be afraid of.
I agree. I think I'm amazed at the advancements in AI, especially over like even just the last 6 months, particularly
Sure.
with LLMs like Copilot and ChatGPT, right? So looking ahead, what emerging technologies or trends should leaders in commercial real estate be preparing for over, say, the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the agentic AI, I mean, you'll hear about that over and over again,
Mhm.
but designing and building AI agents, making it very easy to design and build them to accomplish tasks. That's sort of one thing that's underway now.
Mhm.
What I've been reading about a lot now are communities of agents, or you have two firms that interact with one another and creating an agent on both sides to allow them to interact. Remember like the old expression, have your people call my people kind of thing? I think where we're going to wind up is you're going to have agents on both sides of an equation. Yeah, and you're going to
Mhm.
be looking at agents on one side that are performing a task and agents on the other side are doing it. And then it really presents the options to both sides about how to go forward. And that's where sort of people come in to do their work. There's a lot of that sort of thing that I think is coming, where you can have agents performing tasks and interacting with their opposite numbers in the other companies that you work with. And it'll make things more effective.
I think that is very interesting. And do you think that's 3 to 5 years out, or do you think that's closer?
Oh, it's much faster. It
Yeah.
really is much faster, and it is accelerating quite a bit. And I think there'll be a plateau. I think right now we're in this phase where there's a huge explosion in the number of tools, and then you're going to have
Mhm.
clear winners that'll emerge, and you'll have use cases that'll emerge as being the really practical ones to leverage.
Mhm.
Then I think what'll happen is we'll go into a sort of use phase where they'll take the gains that have been made and then make them more efficient and bake them into processes. And then I think we'll be there for a while. But I think that we're still in that quick acceleration phase where there's lots of tools to choose from. There's lots of opportunities to apply technology to the business. And I think
Mhm.
it's a question of picking the ones that are going to be the quickest wins. I think that's kind of where we are now is, I kind of mentioned it earlier. There's so many tools available and there's so many opportunities.
Mhm.
Right now, it's a question of matching the tool to the data and bringing it into your environment so it helps you. That's the exercise right now.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Your philosophy of looking at AI as a feature and not a product, I think that's a game changer in mindset. It really reinforces how it's a powerful tool for driving efficiency, improving tenant experience, creating long-term value in commercial real estate. And I think that's a really key mind shift. Overall, I just want to say like thank you. We really appreciate your leadership and your partnership with BOMA in advancing innovation across our industry. And thank you again.
Oh no, thanks for having me. This has been fun.